Tracey Friesen. She's talking about story money impact, the transformative power of local media. So Tracey is a media strategist committed to supporting community storytellers and social innovators in creation of social impact. Please welcome Tracey on stage.
Thank you. I think Jody was just an excellent example of art for impact, so I really appreciated that as a lead-in. Story. About a dozen years ago, I was working as a producer at the National Film Board of Canada here in Vancouver, down in Woodwards, and a distinguished gentleman came into my office pitching a project. His name, some of you may know him, he's a Vancouver favorite, Al Edmansky. He had started an organization called Planned Lifetime Advocacy Network, which supported adults with intellectual disabilities that could outlive their parents. This was a new phenomenon in our society entirely, and his organization was created to build support structures around these young people. What I had to say to him at that time is the film board didn't make films for organizations. We didn't do sponsored films. We made films with filmmakers, with storytellers. And I sent him away with the names of a couple of local filmmakers. A couple months later, I got a pitch, a more conventional pitch, not about an organization, but from Force 4 here in Vancouver, a production company, that started with the line, "Chris Jordan is 22. He wants to move out of the family home. But he can't. He has the intellectual capacity of a maybe 7 or 8-year-old, but like any 22-year-old, he wants independence." Now this was a story, so this was the difference. This was something that we could work with. It went on to become a film called The Ties That Bind, produced by the NFB, CBC, and Force 4 in Vancouver, showing Chris over a 3-year period trying to gain enough support around him in order to achieve this dream of his, which was independence from his family. With this, there was a narrative. There was something that we could latch onto as a story structure. Maybe not that much of an aha, but kind of an aha, that there are a lot of interesting topics in this world, topics that we can talk about, but when they're structured in the universal specificity of a specific story, they carry much more weight. So story ingredients are crucial. In this case, there was a good example that the story had a narrative arc, beginning, middle, and end, and also had emotion, and the filmmakers had access. They secured a great relationship with the family so they could film over the period of years. And it had the simplicity in the sense that it was a single trajectory, something for us to hang on to while we were getting to know something more about a complex topic. And what was valuable about this was the memorable nature of it and the use of it as a tool. Al himself went on, he's a quite renowned social innovator. With this tool, he was able to take it across Canada while he was working toward creating Canada, actually the world, I think, first registered disability savings plan. So this is impact. Like, this is a film. Now, I can't say the film alone was the one contributing factor to him doing this, but it gave him something to work with as he was on this journey. And for me, this was a chance to see the power firsthand, as many of the films at the NFB did, for film and media to affect social change. In that job, though, at the film board, I realized it was a bit of a lottery, right? Like, there's gatekeepers here. There's a few number, in particular, documentary filmmakers in this country who have the chance to have a full production budget and the tools and the support to tell their full story. So I started to wonder about the limiting nature of that. What stories are we not hearing? What stories are getting made and are not reaching the audiences that they could reach? And it became a little bit of a nut to crack for me. About 3 or 4 years ago, I got invited to an event in San Francisco called The Good Pitch. And this was like aha moment number, well, probably 21, but in this story, it was aha moment number 2. And I saw in this space filmmakers, pre-selected filmmakers, being in you think Dragon's Den, but a major love-in, right? So there's a panel of people that are weighing in on their projects, but their goal is not to rip it apart. Their goal is to figure out how can we, as either organizations or as NGOs or as philanthropists or impact investors or brands, how can we support the completion of this film getting made and make sure it finds the audiences that it needs to find? And it almost seems like obvious in a way when you look at the puzzle piece, but here in Canada, again, back to the gatekeeper model, all of our major documentary films are, the main funding system is triggered by broadcast licenses, and there are very few of those to go around. Here in this room with these 9 people at a table per film, throwing their love, support, and resources at this filmmaker in front of an audience of 200 people that were likewise doing the same, I went, okay, it takes a bit of a larger village here to get this job done. Another point on that weekend, I had the chance to see a rough cut screening of a film called The Genius of Marion, which is about the filmmaker making a film about his mom, who was herself doing an art project about her mother, who had died of Alzheimer's. But while the filmmaker was making the film, his own mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it ended up becoming quite a different project as he documented the deterioration of his mother. There was a screening of investors in this film, an organization called Impact Partners that brings together high net worth individuals who elect to spend some of their philanthropic dollars on documentary film. Documentary film, for any of you who know, never, almost ever recoups the cost that it takes to make it. This is not a real profitable field, an important and impactful field, but not profitable. And so I knew, even with the weight of impact partners behind these films, that the likelihood of these investors recovering all of their money was pretty slim. But I had the chance to ask them, like, why? Like, why the heck would you write a check for $100,000 to support this film when you might get $72,000 back? And I realized a few things. One is that $72,000 is more than $30,000 or $35,000 they might get back if they did a charitable tax donation. So there's an interesting sweet spot there. And also that they had a more hands-on approach to their philanthropy. It wasn't such a distant thing as writing off a check and having it disappear. They got to be kind of involved in film. They got to look under the curtain. They got to, one guy said, well, my daughter wants to be in the industry, and this is a chance for me to learn more about how it works. And then for other people, it's because of the cause. So there were people who were there who were very clearly supporting this film because of Alzheimer's and because this matters to them. And this is an important cause for their lives. So that brings me to money and the other forms and ways that people are motivated to part with their money. Having been, again, in the traditional model of film funding, broadcasters and public funders are the norm here in Canada, but what I was seeing in the US is that it's a much wider group that can come together to put its energy and support behind media projects. Philanthropists, foundations, impact investors who might have mission alignment with our artists. Again, you take some of the people this morning, Patricia, Jody, who we just heard, and there are people who are driven by wanting to see the causes that are at the root of those stories be positively impacted. And so it becomes mission alignment. And what I love about that is it takes the artists away from this place of cap in hand. Like, I've got to go and ask you for money and I've got to go beg you for money. It actually privileges the artist by acknowledging they have skills as storytellers. And these foundations and these philanthropists, they need those skills. There is mutual benefit here. And in that spirit, there's a much greater chance of connecting these parties and partners together. So, impact. I started to think about this to such an extent that I had to just quit my job at the film board. I mean, there were other reasons. It's interesting and challenging spending a decade at a wonderful but nonetheless bureaucratic public institution. And I felt like there was a chance of doing some more work specifically in this field, so dove into some independent research. And in the middle of that, I got a very unexpected tap through LinkedIn, of all things, from a man in Vancouver, Don Schaefer, who was about to open a brand new radio station. It's called Roundhouse Radio, and he invited me to be full-time employee number 1, I guess, in order to try to bring this vision to life around the opportunity of using a commercial radio license to do good in this world, to make a radio station that can have a community focus and have do the kind of work where through conversation, it's largely a conversation station, through conversation, connect people, break down barriers, and bring awareness to causes and issues. For me, it was a bit of a question to decide to jump on board because I was having traction in this space of story, money, impact and this research. But it was my mentor, first heard about 10 minutes ago, Al Edmansky, who became a friend and an important person in my development, who said, it's the same work, Tracey. It's the same values alignment. It's just a different canvas. This is a privately owned radio station for BC families, and it is inspired by the possibility of creating a more resilient and inclusive city. So kind of go for it. And I did, starting at his dining room table a year and a half ago, and now we have studios in Railtown with 35 staff, and we went on the air in the middle of October. Hopefully some of you have heard about it, and if you haven't, you'll check it out and become members. Can you try to hit play on this? It's just a 1-minute sizzle reel here.
Is on the air, serving downtown Vancouver, Yaletown, Gastown, roundhouseradio.com. We are streaming live.
We're a new voice in town,
where communication is key.
Ideas encouraged.
Communities gather.
A station where listening to you
is as important as
you listening to us.
A trusted friend.
A discussion leader.
An informative guide.
A place where you can explore.
Create.
Inspire.
from local news
to homegrown music.
The heart of Vancouver.
From our house to yours.
Roundhouse Radio.
98.3 Vancouver.
Our city, your voice.
Yay, thanks. So what can radio do in the impact space? Click. I might need a click. Oh, there we go. What kind of impact are we all after, right? There's a ladder of engagement, and many of us have learned that in our various workshops and courses. It's awareness building. And awareness building is the first start. Awareness building leads to people maybe moving a little bit into action, which can lead to behavior change, which can lead to recognizing the larger space that any of our entrenched social issues operate in, what's behind them, what is at the root of some of these issues, how do we have those difficult conversations, which can ultimately, hopefully, lead to policy change, legislation change, a recognition of where do our public resources land, how do we get at things from the earlier stage in order to make a more robust society for us all. I saw this. I guess in Radioland, I've learned a lot, as you might imagine, but one of the things you hear about is the driveway moment. And I had this happen about a month ago. Now, I don't actually have a driveway because I live in a condo, but at work, when I was driving back to work one day, listening to Roundhouse, coming back from a meeting and parking the car in front of the station, I heard voices on there that I wasn't expecting to hear. The show was Impact, which is a show that our boss does every day at 2 o'clock, and it's drawing attention to local nonprofit organizations. And I knew that day the organization was Stroke Recovery Services of British Columbia. But the voices I heard were two staff members. One was a producer telling a story of her mother's stroke, and then one was our receptionist, Natalie. And I'd known Natalie for years. She had been an intern of mine at the National Film Board, and we had hired her at Roundhouse. That's Vance Joy, by the way, if you're wondering. That's just one of the freaking perks of the job. People like that come in and like do interviews and sing. But Natalie is a young woman with physical disabilities, not profound, but visible. And I never knew what they were. I never asked. I never engaged her in a conversation about it. And this discussion was happening with this group, and she came from reception and kind of slowly, she's quite shy, made her way into the equipment room, apparently, I was told after, and listened. And then Dawn saw her in there, and during a commercial break invited her in, where she shared her story that her disabilities stem from a stroke at the age of 7. And I thought, wow, like this is awareness raising happening to me right now. Like this is me learning about somebody that I know, that I didn't really know. This is our whole studio learning more about the people in our midst. And in this most intimate setting, you know, radio is like this, right? But it's also amplifying. There was Natalie taking the opportunity of raising everyone's awareness through her own personal story. And with that, I thought, here I go again. It's story, it's money, support, and impact. Whether Chris Jordan trying to move out on his own and all of the story ingredients that made that project successful, or whether it's Banker and her mom with Alzheimer's and all of the money sources that were able to come together to get that film out into the world to raise awareness around Alzheimer's, or whether Natalie just stepping up in that moment and sharing her personal story. I've seen it time and again in theaters, in living rooms, conference rooms, and now in my car, the power of story, money, impact. So the journey continues. I have a book coming out next month and a conference in June. And it is my intent to try to find ways to support and find extra resources for our Canada storytellers, because if they're strong and robust, our overall society will benefit. So I hope to be able to have that kind of conversation with you and others moving forward. Thank you.